Welcome back to FreightWaves Now this morning on this beautiful Friday here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We've got our senior editor on the line right now, Mr. Greg Miller. Greg, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Great to talk to you and welcome to the show.
Greg, are the ocean carriers going to get two decades worth of profits in 1 year?
They could. I mean, every time I come on the show, I talk about rates rising, and I'm going to say it again. I mean, the rates are rising. It's unbelievable. The carriers are implementing GRIs every 2 weeks now, general rate increases. They did another one in July. Asia East Coast rates are about 8 to 11,000 spot. To the West Coast, about 6 to 9. You tack up to $10,000 in premium surcharges on top of that. So we're hearing about people paying more than $20,000 per 40-foot equivalent unit to get from Asia to the U.S. That is, if you said that a year ago, people would have thought you were crazy. So amazing. So even though congestion is curbing the volumes, the rates are so high that the carrier profits are just through the roof.
Greg, yeah, it's like the spread between East and West Coast is now more than the rates were just this time last year. It's absolutely crazy. Is there any abatement ahead? Is there any signs that this could be easing?
Not at all. Not at all. The rates in the second quarter are higher than the first, and the rates in the beginning of the third quarter are higher than the second. We were talking about that 100 billion figure. The UK consultancy Drury earlier this week estimated that the carrier sector as a whole could earn $80 billion this year, and if rates were higher than expected, up to 100 billion. And the reason that's so interesting is that McKinsey, another consultancy, said in a study in February 2018, they looked back at the horrible performance of the liners through history and found that over the previous 2 decades, the carriers had destroyed about $100 billion in shareholder value. So that's the amazing thing. In 1 year, this year, carriers could make up for all that they lost in the past. Again, amazing.
So, Greg, with that potential, that true unicorn number of $100 billion, is there any idea or any indication of what these carriers could do with that money? Are they going to put it back into getting new containers, into upgrading equipment, into paying their people who have, done really God's work at this point by working through this entire pandemic? Are they going to put that back into their systems to make things better?
Well, what they're going to do is buy more ships and charter in more ships and expand their exposure, to these kind of freight rates. I mean, if you look at the second quarter profits, the numbers are just starting to roll out. Last night, Matson pre-announced second quarter results in a range that was 62 to 69% above consensus, so completely blew it out of the water. Some more numbers: Costco's second quarter profits plus 40% versus the first quarter. OOCL second quarter revenues plus 15% versus the first quarter. And finally, Evergreen second quarter revenue plus 11% since the first quarter. So the second quarter clearly is going to be better than the first quarter. And this is why we're seeing the next part of the story, which is politics and the pushback and the potential for regulation.
Yeah, a couple questions here. We kind of talked about it with John Gallagher earlier, was about what can the U.S. government do to companies, non-American companies that are operating these ocean liners? And then my follow-up is, you said that you expected them to buy more ships, buy more containers, but I would just question, that they've been given this pricing power, they've enjoyed this pricing power for the last year. Do you think they'll be reluctant to give it away by adding as much capacity as they could?
No, in the long term, you're right. But I would say that this idea that the carriers are somehow gouging prices, if you think about it, we're not talking about imports of PPE here. We're talking about people that are bringing in furniture and Pelotons and bikes and TVs. And so they're doing this at a time when the federal government has flooded the market with stimulus. So it's obvious there's going to be this surge in demand for imports. And at the same time, on the supply side, the carriers have been affected by things like West Coast congestion, by the Ever Given, by the COVID outbreak in in Wuhan. So it's obvious that there's more demand than supply. So it makes sense that the rates are this high. And I don't see what regulation is going to do to solve that.
It's a little bit ironic, right, that the U.S. government gives out all the stimulus for consumers to go buy things, and then the Pelotons of the world and the companies that are having this great demand are now going to the government saying, hey, you got to fix this. We can't get our stuff into the country. It's quite ironic now.
Yeah, and they're saying, oh, it's your fault. I mean, the one thing they can do is look at the detention and demurrage charges. I think that's, if you look at the executive order, what they're focused on. They're looking and seeing if the carriers are somehow taking advantage of the situation and charging shippers for things that are completely outside of their control. And yeah, that could make sense. But on the other hand, I'd argue that if they limit those charges, and if that somehow equates to shippers using containers for free storage more so than they have in the past, and that somehow reduces the amount of containers in circulation, that's going to be bad.
And so, Greg, when it comes to the idea of Congress revising the Shipping Act, and they're not, likely to make those revisions, could there be any unintended consequences that stem out from that?
Yeah, I mean, as I just said, I mean, if what they do changes the amount of container availability in the United States, that's going to be a problem. If, for example, they say, carriers, you must pick up these export containers, that's going to take containers out of circulation, and that's going to be a problem for importers. I mean, there's a finite amount of containers. If they were to say, we don't like these alliances anymore, we're going to break up the alliances somehow, that could have implications for the services in the United States. So who knows what will happen? But the situation's in crisis now, and if they were to make major changes to the system, there could be unintended consequences that could be even worse for U.S. importers, or not. I mean, we're in uncharted territory here.
Greg, let's shift gears a little bit to used ship prices, because I think there's almost as crazy a market going on in the used ship prices as there are in the used car market here in the U.S. Talk to me about basically the craziness of going on with ships trading hands right now.
Right. So if in the short term, it takes 2 years to build a ship. So if you're trying to get ships now, there's only two ways to do it. You can buy a ship, or you can charter in a ship. Same thing has happened in the charter-in market, where we've seen short-term charters for ridiculous amounts of, $140,000 a day. And so basically what the people that have own the ships, that charter the ships to the liners, are doing is they're chartering them out for multi-year periods. So all these ships are going to be out of circulation for years and years and years. And so basically that leaves one option. If you are a carrier and you want to increase your exposure to these incredible rates, you got to buy a ship. And you can buy a ship now for an incredible price, and you can pay off a large amount of that ship over this year. So that's what everyone's doing. And by the way, it's not just the liners, it's all these other companies, which are called the non-operating owners, the tonnage providers, the people whose business it is to own ships and then charter out to liners. They've chartered out all their ships already. They're making fantastic rates. So they're like, well, how can we make more money? We'll buy more ships, and then we'll charter them to liners. So it's an incredible business right now.
Greg, talk to us a little bit about what you have coming up next, what stories you're working on right now.
Well, the situation is continuing to accelerate. I mean, it's how do you talk about traditional peak season in a time like this? I mean, what is peak season? All of the cycles are off. But I mean, think about it. We're going into the back to school season. We're going into the Christmas holiday season. People are scrambling already to get their holiday goods in now. So this situation is not going to end soon. We're having people talking now about this situation will continue until at least Chinese New Year in the first quarter of 2022. So, as each week passes, the situation gets more and more extreme. And for shippers, the problem really is not so much the price. The question is can you get cargo in now at any price? And how does this affect inflation? How is this being passed along? So every week there's another story. Something else is happening.
No doubt, Greg. Thanks so much for your insights today. Have a great weekend, my man.
You too.